This is your Thursday Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Boy, I guess you guys can probably figure out what we're going to talk about mostly today. Wild wins 3-0 Game 6 Wednesday night over Vegas at XL Energy Center. That means there will be a Game 7 in Vegas Friday, 8 p.m. Not too bad. Better than 9:30, right? Winner take all. Game 7 lead. I remind you, the Wild 3-0 all time in Game 7s, all of them being on the road. That history doesn't necessarily mean much at this point, of course. Different teams, different eras. Just a reminder that it can happen, that it's that these completions of comebacks, that these games, it is not impossible to win on the road. In fact, for the Wild, that has been the norm in their history. I'm going to talk a lot about that game here coming up. We'll also have Randy Johnson, covers Gophers football for the Star Tribune, get a little update on that beat as they get prepared to hit the recruiting trail in person for the first time in quite some time next week in the bigger picture of things. But first, like I say, what did I miss? Yeah, it was the game last night. That was all anybody could talk about. And the biggest point I want to make right off the bat is I think Dean Evason, head coach of the Wild, deserves a lot of credit in that game. I think there's a lot of kind of back and forth going into the game, who's going to be in the lineup, people wanting them to change up the what they've been doing after Game 5, a game where they were outshot 40-14, but did come away with the win in Vegas 4-2. I wanted Matt Boldy in the lineup. He was skating with the team in the optional skate Wednesday morning. You saw him, working with some of their best players. You were wondering, is Boldy coming in? Is this going to be the moment where Dean Evason goes all in and pushes the rookie into the starting lineup in the hopes of getting more scoring punch? But in the end, he ends up going with the same lineup he had in Game 5, and I had my doubts about it because I did not think they played great in Game 5. But give Dean Evason credit; that was the right button to push because this turned out to be a very tight checking game. I don't know if that's the game you want to put your rookie into. You know what I mean? A game where one mistake, someone who maybe isn't, not that a rookie is naturally going to make a mistake, but he might be a little bit more prone to make a mistake. He might not be quite as familiar with the systems you want to play. He's not as familiar with the teammates he would be playing with. So, going with the more veteran group, not putting him in the lineup at that point, probably pretty smart on Dean Evason's part. So I think that was, maybe, I don't know if it was subterfuge. I don't know if, they're kind of playing some mind games with Vegas and pretending like he might play. I think there was definitely was a chance that Marcus Foligno wasn't going to be able to go. Definitely was a chance that some other guys could have drawn out of that game because of the way they had played before. But Dean Evason ends up staying the course with the lineup and is rewarded with probably the best game this team has played overall in this series. I still don't think this is the best they can play, period. But I think that was the best they've played overall in this series, which bodes well for boded well for not only for their chances in Game 6, but certainly for Game 7. So that's one piece of where I think Dean Evason should get some credit. Number two, I think he just he outcoached in game Pete DeBoer, the head coach for Vegas. I think DeBoer and Vegas were pretty tight in this game. To be honest, they were pressing. You get them into this kind of tight checking game where they're not going to be able to have all the open ice they wanted. They had a lot of open ice, a lot of line rushes, even in Game 5 when they lost, and a lot of those previous games where they got that momentum going, and it kind of snowballed. They didn't give that to them in Game 6 on Wednesday night. It was a lot more controlled. It was a lot more back and forth. It was, it felt kind of like a Game 7 already where neither team was going to make a mistake, and I think that boded well for the Wild because it made Vegas play even tighter, realizing there was a certain desperation setting in. It's like, oh man, we had this series in our control, had the game at our building to win in Game 5. That got away. Now we're back here where we haven't played well, even though we won, 3-4 in Minnesota. They got to be thinking, we're getting some chances, but this doesn't feel like this open flow game. And I think a lot of that has to do with the systems they put in place. I think the Wild played a much better second period in this game. And I think a lot of that is tactical. I think a lot of that is coming from Dean Evason and understanding what Vegas was doing to spring so many chances. And again, it wasn't a perfect second period, but Vegas stayed off the scoreboard, and they had far fewer chances than they'd had in previous second periods.
Enjoy your money your way when you switch to Royal Credit Union. You can pay friends and family for free, deposit checks on the go, and even get alerts about your account sent in real time. Stop in and open your account today, or get started at rcu.org/yourway. Insured by NCUA.
I want to play a clip, actually, from Marcus Foligno talking about the second period and how he thought that was their best second period that they had played in this series.
It's been like that all season. I mean, honestly, I think, just from Cam on out, I mean, it's just been that mindset where we're never out of it. Games that might be away from us in the first and second, we always have a chance. So, Cam, unbelievable tonight. And just, everyone just playing the right way. Finally, our second period was the way we wanted to play. And, our best one yet in the series so far. So again, we just keep clawing, keep working hard, and we know we have the firepower to get goals in the net, and the work ethic's always there. So that's what's great about our team, and that's why we're in a Game 7 situation.
So then it comes to the third period, right? It's still 0-0 going into the third period. Vegas has got to be pressing a little bit. Wild gets a great play along the board. Zach Parise chips it ahead. I'll talk about him a little bit in a moment here. Chips it ahead to Kevin Fiala. Great line rush. Gets it to Ryan Hartman. That's 1-0 right there. Then Vegas comes back, gets what looks like it could be the tying goal, but there's goalie interference involved in it. Evason's up on the bench yelling, hey, this is exactly what happened to us a couple games ago. DeBore ends up challenging it. It's ruled no goal on the ice, which is a big deal for the Wild, but DeBore ends up challenging it. Pretty risky. It felt to me like that was a desperation challenge. He said after the game it was worth it. His players backed him up. I get it. Something so big as a goal in the third period that could tie a game is quite possibly worth challenging, but that to me was a pretty cut and dried interference on the ice. It was kind of an outcome-based challenge and not an intellectual-based challenge. It felt like a Mike Tice challenge. No offense to Mike Tice, love Mike Tice, but he used to make challenges like that with the Vikings where they had no chance of succeeding. He was just upset that the play didn't go their way. Mike Zimmer does that a little bit sometimes too. He just throws the the challenge flag in the NFL in disgust. Wants to get the call overturned because he just wants the play to be different. I felt like DeBore did that a little bit in Wednesday's game. He wanted that goal so bad. He wanted that call so bad that he was willing to challenge it, even though there was a risk. In the NHL, obviously, there's a risk. You lose the challenge, you give up a power play. And it was a quick review, no goal, 1-0 Wild. And what happens on the ensuing power play? Kevin Fiala scores 2-0 Wild. There you go. That wasn't quite your ball game at that point, but when you go up 2-0 in the third period and you've got that momentum, and then of course Nick Bukestad gets the real dagger goal later in the third period, but that's a huge momentum swing, and it was already a momentum swing when you think you score and you don't. Pete DeBoer added to that by making the challenge unsuccessful, so you feel bad about that, and then on top of that you give up the power play that gives the Wild a 2-0 lead. So another example of how I think Dean Evason outcoached Pete DeBoer in that game. I want to hear a clip right now from Cam Talbot, actually. It was funny after the game, the Wild goalie was asked about that interference play and what a pivotal moment it was and what he was thinking as that play was unfolding in front of him.
I'm always nervous. I never get those calls, but the way that they've been calling them all playoff long, it'd be hard to overturn that. I mean, TJ was yelling at him while he was in the crease the entire time, and then called it a goal originally, and then eventually made the right call and overturned it. But if that one stood, I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. I'd just be getting fined.
Third piece of this is I think Evason did a good job keeping the guys relatively loose. I don't know how much of that's on coaching, how much is just, the attitude these players have had all year, but I think the attitude they've had all year has been fueled in part by Dean Evason's messaging and just how he has them prepared for these games, how he's not, having them grind, how he's not, putting too much pressure on them. I thought he had a great quote after the game talking about, kind of working in tandem with Bill Guerin, who's been there before, who's seen Pittsburgh win 2 Stanley Cups as an assistant GM there, who knows, Kevin Fiala, perfect example, right? He's not having a great series coming into Game 6. He's had chances for sure, but the puck's not going in the net. Ends up making the 2 biggest plays offensively in the whole game, where he sets up Ryan Hartman's goal with a beautiful pass on that 2-on-1, then scores on that power play. This is Dean Evason talking about that, before, what the message was before the game, and I thought this was interesting. So let's just listen to the clip first off.
Billy Guerin talked to us, a couple of games ago and said, to talk to Kevin and just tell him that we'll need him at some point. Like, it doesn't have to be every game. And coming from a guy like that knows and's been there and done that, and that it doesn't have to be every game, right? You have to just stay the course, play right, and maybe you'll get a chance to make a difference. And he did tonight. So Kevin hasn't changed anything. He's played the same way, just got rewarded tonight.
And that's a great point, because we do tend to think about these players like, they didn't score in 3 games. Like, in a season, if you don't score in 3 games, that's not that big of a deal. Like, you aren't expected to score every game. As long as you're bringing a certain level of effort, as long as the chances are there, you have to believe that it will come. Things get magnified in the playoffs. Like, here's the thing. Like, if the series would have ended after 5 games, we would have been talking about Kevin Fiala and how he didn't succeed in this series. But because the series gets extended to a game 6, he gets more chances, he gets a goal, he gets an assist in this game. He now all of a sudden has some momentum and some positive energy. He was the same player, like Dean Evason said, the whole time, but now he gets rewarded for it. And I think a lot of that is the messaging from Dean Evason, making sure these guys know, hey, your time will come. Stick with it. You don't have to score every single game. That's unrealistic. As long as you keep with it, your time will come and you will score the goals that we need you to score when we need you to score them. Let's talk about Zach Parise's game for a little bit. Made the chip along the wall, set up that 2-on-1 with Kevin Fiala and Ryan Hartman. Great little play, veteran play. The overriding thing with Parise in this game is I watched it, just wondering about the future, I guess. You don't know what's going to happen in Game 7. You don't know what's going to happen beyond, the next month or two, but you couldn't help but wonder, is this possibly Zach Parise's last game at XL Energy Center, at least in a Wild sweater? Again, hard to imagine what's going to happen in the offseason. I think it would be hard to trade him from a contractual standpoint, but so much has happened this season that makes you wonder where his place is in this organization. Now, his last 2 games have shown you his value. He scores the goal in Game 5 in Vegas that gives them the lead. Makes the kind of spring ahead pass in this game that gives them the lead. I don't know if they win those games without Zach Parise in the lineup. That said, this season's more than the last 2 games. So I don't know what's going to happen with him. Big picture, what I do know is this: if for some reason that ends up being the last game he played at XL Energy Center, if the Wild lose Game 7 in Vegas, which we don't know what's going to happen in that game. If something happens this offseason where they just come to an agreement where, this run was great, 9 years, but it's time to move on. We need to find a way to move on and get you to a different team. I'm glad that he was able to have that game regardless. I'm glad that this didn't end on a completely negative note for Zach Parise if for some reason that was the end. So that's the bigger picture point I wanted to make from watching that game, from seeing him play in that game. It's just good to see how he was able to rally his season regardless of what comes next. One other thing before I move on from this game, I thought the Wild, like I said, did a much better job in the second period. That to me was a key to this game. They'd been outscored 8-1 in the second period of the first 5 games this season. That period's been a problem for the Wild all year. Outscored, I believe, 61-46 in the second period during the regular season. They had great first periods. They had great third periods in the regular season. And again, you saw that. You kind of felt like if they could get through that second period without giving up the lead, they had a very good chance. And when you go in 0-0 after 1, that puts some pressure on your second period. But they didn't give Vegas the same quality chances that they'd had before in the second period. I think they gave up 3 of what they call high danger chances in the second period. That's not ideal, but it's pretty good, especially compared to what they'd been giving up. And Cam Talbot denied all of those, played a really good game again. But he had to be very good in this game instead of superhuman, which he's had to be in previous games. So found a way to slow Vegas' speed in that second period to keep them from getting that 1 minute, 1.5 minute possession times that that create those opportunities that tire you out. that demoralize you and totally tilt momentum. It just didn't feel like they tilted momentum in the same way, and as a result, the Wild was able to get out of that period, 0-0 still, setting up a third period, which has been a very good period for them, and of course was in Game 6. So the Wild will need to do more of the same in Game 7 if they expect to advance in this series and not just make it a nice story.
I'm Nyla Jean Myers, Senior Assistant Sports Editor at the Star Tribune. Thank you for listening to Strip Sports Daily Delivery. This work is made possible by our Star Tribune subscribers. For unlimited access to the articles mentioned in this podcast and our coverage of Minnesota sports from pros to preps, go to startribune.com/subscribe.
Happy to have Randy Johnson on Daily Delivery today. Randy covers Gopher football for the Star Tribune, new to the beat, but he's been on the beat before. Welcome back to the Gopher football beat, Randy, and welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Kind of a Back to the Future thing. I was on it for a couple years, and then went on the puck drop and Gophers hockey and college hockey beat. And no, it's been fun to get back here, and you're looking forward to it.
You're more Big Lebowski than Back to the Future. You always will be. You're Walter Sobchak in my mind, always with the fantastic Halloween outfits. But we'll leave that. We'll leave that at that. So I understand you had a chance to chat with Coach PJ Fleck earlier in the week. We've had access to PJ along the way, but maybe you can kind of give me a little overview of some of the key takeaways from that. I read your story. You can see that on Star Tribune, startribune.com earlier this week. But what were some of the key takeaways from talking to PJ and just kind of getting an update on where they are at this point in the planning for 2021?
Yeah, it was the first time sat down and talked to him since the spring game. Basically, just checking in and see what all they're doing, what this time of year is about. A little bit different this year just because of COVID and the recruiting shutdown that they weren't able to go out and recruit in person. That ends on June 1st on Tuesday, so they'll be hitting the road to look at players, and they'll have satellite camps in different areas of the country, and they'll be having their own camps. June will be busy with recruiting. They'll have a couple weekends in June and certain weekdays where they'll have recruits visiting. It might not be as the number of visits might not be as much as they have in the past. It's more of I'd say precision. They're aiming at certain players. You probably won't be seeing the recruiting class of 2022 having say 20 to 25 players. It'd be more in the teens likely. Just sure. Roster management's a little different now with the whole transfer portal and everything, and kind of almost like free agency. And PJ's talking a little bit like basically more of a general manager role at times in managing the roster.
And that's funny you say that because I think I tweeted like a couple months ago, and this wasn't for PJ, this was for Gopher men's basketball. But once Ben Johnson got hired, and then you could see the roster fluctuation, I think I tweeted something like, "Who do you think is going to have a better year in free agency, Gopher basketball or the Vikings?" Because it feels like free agency at this point to a large degree, and it must change his job, fairly significantly, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think so. He has to. Even this year, they filled some spots. Got a couple defensive linemen, one from Clemson, one from North Carolina State, basically to help bolster the depth there and get some more talent in there. So there's a way to you might be able to address a weakness pretty immediately by using the transfer role.
Now, like recruiting will always be the lifeblood of a program still, I would imagine, getting your own players and getting them in for multiple years and getting them into your program. And that's been a big part of any success he's had anywhere he's gone. I think we've talked about a lot of problems, a lot of programs lost a lot during the COVID pause. I think the Gophers lost more than a lot of others just because of the timing of things, how they had momentum going into 2020, and then they really didn't, at least attendance-wise. And then PJ, I'm sure some of what he's selling translates over Zoom, but some of what he's selling is probably better pitched in person. And so I'm sure he's excited to kind of get back more into that mode.
Yeah, most definitely there. he's the whole thing. He said we're a people program, that type of thing. It's it's building those bonds. It's easier to build a bond face to face in person than it is via video. So he's pretty excited to get back on the road and hooking up with recruits.
More immediately, I mean, it's still a few months away at this point, but they opened the season, interestingly enough, against Ohio State at TCF Bank Stadium. They haven't, I think I read in your story, they haven't opened against in a traditional season. I mean, last year they obviously played Big Ten only, but in a traditional season, it's been a long time since their first game of the season was against a Big Ten opponent. This is obviously a marquee opponent too, an opportunity to fill the stadium, perhaps if all the restrictions have been lifted at that point, but also a pretty daunting task when you're talking about playing Ohio State right off the bat.
Yeah, you're talking one of the when college football's blue bloods. They played for the national championship this past season. They've won the Big Ten 4 seasons in a row. They're it's a program that just keeps rolling. PJ say they reload, they don't rebuild. They did lose quite a bit from last year, including Justin Fields, their quarterback, who's now with the Bears. They had 10 players drafted, which tied the number that Alabama had for the most. So they have some filling to do, holes to fill. But when you're filling them with 4 and 5 stars recruits, that makes it a lot easier. So it's obviously Gophers will be underdog in that game. It's interesting that they're opening the Big Ten season at home and basically to start the season. Last time they did that, besides Michigan last year, was 1994 against Penn State. I remember that one pretty well. I was working at the Center Daily Times newspaper in State College, Pennsylvania at the time. Much younger version of myself. But the 1994 Penn State team went undefeated, and they opened with a 56-3 victory over the Gophers. That was the Kajana Carter, Kerry Collins team that basically won the Rose Bowl over Oregon that year.
Jim Wacker's team couldn't hang with that squad, huh?
No, they couldn't. They had some trouble in that game.
I would imagine PJ Fleck's team will be more competitive against Ohio State. You never know. I mean, it's like I said, an opportunity. It's hard for me to really figure out what to make of this year's team, because obviously you had the 11-2 season in 2019, the big bowl game win, opportunity missed to a certain degree. If you win one of those other games, maybe you're talking about a special, even more special season. And then last year, 3-4, it's hard to know how to evaluate any team's season in 2020. So maybe your perspective and even PJ's perspective on, what do they take out of 2020? Do they feel like they can kind of skip over that? Do they learn from that? Do they feel like, no, we still had some problems last year we have to smooth out if we want to be back to where we were in 2019 or somewhere near that?
I think it's a combination of all those, Mike. Basically, they grew. You saw them get better on defense. They were pretty bad beginning of the year. We all know. That was something that they improved on, and I think they want to carry that over, obviously, this year. They seem to have more depth there this year. They're at linebacker especially. They brought in Jack Gibbons, transfer from Abilene Christian, who will help their Mariano Sorimar and doesn't have to do everything. You get Braylon Oliver back from a knee injury. That'll help quite a bit. I would expect that's one area where we should see if they'll be able to build upon what they did toward the end of the season last year. It was such a start and stop situation with COVID and everything last year. I think they're just trying to gain any lesson they can from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you had Rashad Bateman opt out, opt in, then back out, and obviously he's a first round pick in this last year's draft. It's just interesting to see how all these teams kind of pick up. And obviously it was the same for everybody, but it was also to an extreme with them. I mean, even imagine that kind of middle part of the season where they had they had barely any players when they went to, was it Nebraska? Didn't they have like a decimated roster there? They had a pause. I mean, imagine that even if 2021 isn't completely normal, it's pretty close. and that we should get a more true accounting of where this program is at that point. A couple more things, Randy. One is Tanner Morgan is a big piece of that puzzle. As you saw, as you watched spring practice, I know a lot of that's about building depth. What were your impressions of him, where he's at, and I guess also, who he's going to throw the ball to and what the depth looks like on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I think Tanner looked efficient. That's the main thing, and that's always been Tanner. Last year it was a little bit more of a struggle. When you don't have a Tyler Johnson anymore, and then you only have a Rashad Bateman at times, it made it tougher. Chris Hoffman-Bell stepped up nicely. Daniel Jackson, another receiver, freshman last year that played well, and I believe they'll be counting on him quite a bit. That's just basically Tanner building rapport with those guys will be interesting to see this year. Be interesting to see also if they move if they throw the tight end a little bit more, that type of situation. I think too what helps is that Tanner has a lot more time this year with coordinator Mike Sanford Jr. than he did last year. With very little time last year in spring ball and then truncated fall camp. They didn't get it going the way you would have hoped on offense in the passing game. Obviously, running game did great with Mo Ibrahim.
Yep, they should be good on the offensive line again, right? I mean, they've got a lot of depth and experience there.
Yeah, very, very much so. You have the starters from last year back, and then you return Curtis Dunlop Jr. from injury and Daniel Falalele from COVID-19 opt-out. So that should be a very deep group.
Well, looking forward to seeing how it plays out. Obviously, we got a long way to go until fall camp, even in the start of the season. But appreciate the check-in, Randy. Glad you got a chance to chat with PJ Fleck and kind of see an update. And interested to see what kind of recruiting inroads they're able to make now that they are back doing that more in person. Randy, take care. We'll talk to you again down the road for daily delivery. Okay.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Mike. Appreciate it.
Enjoyed talking to Randy Johnson, catching up a little bit on Gopher football. Like I said, a big year for them. I think I saw an over-under come out. Over-under on their win total, 8.5 this year. That's a lot of optimism coming out of the gambling world, probably because if you look at this team, the offensive line and the defensive line look like they're going to be really good, really deep, and very veteran. That could translate into wins. Wins in the trenches tend to translate into wins on the field. So optimism for this team, even coming off of that 3-4 season, maybe don't throw that out completely, but thinking more that this could be more like 2019 than 2020, and that would certainly be a welcome sight around here. Let's finish with the cooler. Back to the Wild for a moment. Game 7 brings back memories. I was helping to cover that back in 2003. Kind of funny. I didn't do much with that Colorado series where Andrew Brunette scored the winning goal, obviously in Game 7 in Colorado, shocked the world. This series feels a little bit more like that one than the one that followed. I was actually covering a lot of the Timberwolves playoff series. They were playing the Lakers at the same time. Kind of a weird thing where both teams in the playoffs. You don't get that every day. But once that was over, I got moved on to like some sidebar duty with the Wild in the Vancouver series, traveling back and forth to Vancouver. Game 7 of that series, I'm going to talk a lot more about that with Wes Walz on Friday's show. I'm going to have Wes on, obviously, who's instrumental in that series, scored the tying goal in Game 7, and now obviously does some great work with Bally Sports North. But I just remember from that game, the Wild's resilience. They got down 2-0 on the road in Game 7 against Vancouver after, blowout wins in Games 5 and 6. They get one back in the end of the first period of that game, no scoring in the second period, then 3-goal blitz in the third period to win 4-2. That was the second series in a row they'd come back from 3-1. This Wild team trying to do the exact same thing. We will see if they can finish it off Friday night. Excited to talk to Wes Walz about what that will take, what it did take in 2003, and all sorts of things like that on Friday's show. Thanks for joining me here today. Please check back again Friday. Should be a great show again. Like I said, Wes Walz on, and plenty of other things to go as well. We'll see you again on Friday.